Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about the signs and symptoms of unhealthy partnerships, of unhealthy, unfulfilled, unhappy, and undesirable marriages, and the effect of those unhealthy partnerships, those unhealthy marriages on the individuals and on the children as well, on the entire unit, on the entire team as well. So just like we have signs and symptoms of physical distress, of what physical ill health can and does look like, if it's a chronic thing and persists on most days of our lives, in the similar manner, we have signs and symptoms of the ill health of a partnership, of a marriage. And some of those aspects are pretty obvious and pretty explicit, while the other aspects are not so obvious and are pretty implicit. And if I could name a few signs and symptoms of the ill health of the marriage on most days, with most of these symptoms, they kind of go like this: lack of communication, lack of conflict resolution, a lot of conflict or avoidance of conflict, a lot of unpleasantness or avoidance of those unpleasantness on most days, lack of respect, lack of boundaries. For boundaries are those non-negotiable standards that are negotiated in a healthy way to be put as standards for the individuals and for the partnership, for the team, and for the marriage as a whole. Now, of course, a mindful relationship also realizes that these, after a point in time, can be renegotiated as well, can be edited as well, maybe to some degree, maybe completely. Now, of course, mindful partnerships, respectful partnerships do also realize that these boundaries can be re-evaluated and renegotiated after a point in time if need be. There's either a lack of trust or no trust between the partners, and invariably no trust within their own selves to be able to trust the team member as well. And in a way, it implicitly and then explicitly also tells us that there's lack of a sense of belonging and thereby a lack of the sense of safety even within this partnership, even within this marriage. There's criticism, there's contempt, and a lack of respect on most days of this partnership. Within this teamwork, there's no or barely any vulnerability, emotional vulnerability within this partnership because there's no trust and no boundaries as well. There's no friendship and barely any camaraderie, and there's a lot of power struggle on most days within such a marriage and such a partnership. It almost feels like it's a I versus you match, to see and rather more to prove as to who's the better one when it's I versus you, when it's me versus you. And so on most days, it's I or me versus you rather than I, me, and you as a team that grows together, that grows rather peacefully, mindfully together. Which then also tells us that these partnerships and these marriages don't experience peace, P-E-A-C-E, peace, on most days of this relationship. There's a lot of unhealthy manipulation, the word being unhealthy, and guilt tripping, blaming and shaming on most days within this partnership. Such a marriage or such a partnership on most days feels very obligatory. And many times many people would notice telling themselves that I or we have to do it, should do it, as if there's no choice, as if they barely have any choices which they can freely choose and be accountable and responsible for. And in a way, it implicitly tells us that it's a more mindless and a responseless marriage rather than a more mindful and a more responsible one. Within this partnership or within such a marriage, There's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of warmth. Rather, there might be a lot of coldness and distance between the partners, between the couples, which fosters lack of intimacy, lack of emotional support, lack of shared joy, and a whole lot of loneliness. So though people are together, staying together, they still feel more lonely. They still feel more misunderstood than understood. There's a lack of compassion, there's a lack of empathy, and more sense of entitlement and judgmentalism on most days within such partnerships. The other signs and symptoms of unhealthy partnership, of unhealthy marriage, is a lot of stonewalling, wherein due to any triggers or distressing situations that can be resolved, the partner prefers to shut themselves down rather than take ownership of what they are feeling, what they are going through, what they are experiencing, and addressing it and communicating it in a more healthier, grown-up way. And indirectly, it again tells up that if two people can do it in grown-up ways, the relationship itself, the partnership in itself, has created a space wherein two people and the team has grown together. Another sign and symptom is that a lot of secrets are intentionally kept, are deliberately kept because of the feeling of unsafety and mistrust within such marriages and within such partnerships. There's a lack of emotional connection and thereby psychological unsafety within such dynamics that plays out on most days, is experienced on most days. One of the other signs within such dynamics, unhealthy partnerships and marriages, is the feeling of feeling neglected. That both people, or at least one party, feels neglected within such dynamics on most days. On the other hand, it can swing to the opposite direction, wherein it looks like that on some days there's tons of attention given, and one may feel over the moon, the stars, and on top of the universe, while as on most other days, one ends up feeling neglected and probably even abandoned and discarded. Rather, let me use some other words: feeling rejected and probably even unwanted. Within such unhealthy dynamics, unhealthy partnerships, unhealthy marriages, people feel stuck. People feel that they have to compromise a lot in order to sustain and bind this relationship, or to be binded and bonded within this relationship. So it's a binding and a bondage out of fear, out of insecurity, and not necessarily out of some shared joys, some shared values, shared peace, shared trust, both on individual levels and as a team itself for most days within such partnerships, within such marriage dynamics, within such equations. Yet another signs of coexisting within unhealthy marriages, within unhealthy partnerships, is a lot of deliberate secrecy, is a lot of dishonesty, is a lot of coldness, emotional coldness on most days of this partnership, of this collaboration. And just like with regards to physical health, if one organ of the body gets compromised, if one organ of the body begins to malfunction, it's almost never possible that the entire body will not start to malfunction at some point in time or the other, and in a similar way. Not the same way, but in a similar way. If these two team members have been collaborating in such a dynamic, have been creating such a dynamic, intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or subconsciously, it's not a conducive environment for the entire team. And it affects both the team members, emotionally, psychologically, and physically, as well as the other team members as well, including the children. For in a way, if most of these symptoms are existing within this partnership, within this marriage on most days, wherein the two partners are not able to communicate effectively, resolve conflicts effectively, have respect for each other, have felt more stuck rather than felt the growth within them and within the relationship. The children, fortunately or unfortunately, being very perceptive, being sponge-like, absorb all of this within their system, ending up feeling more dysregulated than regulated, ending up feeling more distressed rather than feeling more resilient, wherein they know that at times life will throw curveballs, life will present itself with curveballs as an opportunity for one to grow, as an opportunity for one to overcome that challenge. And with the healthy support, one is able to do that. Invariably telling us that healthy partnerships, that healthy marriages on the psychological level are built more on interdependency, wherein boundaries are communicated, wherein trust is established, one little brick at a time over a period of time, with consistency, with transparency, with open, honest communications, and not in isolated ways. Within such dynamics, because there's lack of psychological belonging, children being the sponge that they are, in a way also feel less belonged and more isolated, at least on the psychological, on the emotional levels, leading to extreme codependency or hyper independent attitude, wherein nobody needs anybody but are there just for namesake. And just like I said, that children are very perceptive. They are like the sponge that absorb everything without filtering. And just like the world-renowned doctor, the world-renowned speaker, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's even gone on to tell us that there have been studies that have been conducted on children as old and as little as 2 years old, telling us, revealing to us through their urine samples, the stress level in their urine sample is very revealing, is very telling about the state of stress and distress within the parents' marriage. So the stress level in the urine sample of the children is one of the huge indicators of the distressed state of marriage itself, of the distressed state of the partnership itself. And in a way, it's not just telling about the impact of that on the kids as little as 2 years old and above, but it's also telling us how intentional and how mindful we can get with regards to creating this collaboration, with regards to creating this partnership and this bond or bondage. And to a large degree, children emulate what they see and not necessarily what they hear most days. It sets up their expectations as to what partnerships and marriages look like and that they should expect for themselves. For if such a partnership exists for a very long period of time, it almost gets normalized. And over here I'm remembering a very powerful quote by a very well-known and a very profound psychiatrist, Carl Jung, who had gone on to say that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life, the unfulfilled life of its parents. And maybe we need to reflect, we need to be honest with ourselves, to answer for ourselves if our marriage is fulfilling both the partners and the team as well, if it gives us a sense of fulfillment or not. And maybe that'll help us get a little curious to be able to reflect, to be able to answer for ourselves as to what brings fulfillment in our lives. What are the aspects on the individual level and as a team, as a partnership, that brings more fulfillment? And so maybe it's time that we take the onus, that we take the accountability and the responsibility to firstly understand for ourselves if we have created a healthy partnership, a healthy marriage, or an unhealthy one. And if we are a parent, I think the best question that one can ask is, would we want such a marriage, would we want such a partnership for our kids, our kid? And if we would not want it for them, maybe it's time that we reworked on our marriage and created a different storyline, and a different narration to creating a healthier marriage, through which we also feel better, creating a better environment. And our kids learn, our children learn that things can always be reworked, that a partnership can be renegotiated upon, that a new kind of a collaboration can always be created at any point in time, only if we are willing to reflect and take accountability of the things that we want, of the things we wish to create, and of the things that we are willing to work upon. Let's try and do that for ourselves. Let's try and reflect on that. And I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.